All right. Good morning, Doug. Today, I want to talk about the breakup of America. Now, we actually did a video on this a few months ago, and we talked about the fact that you talked about the fact that the U.S. was so fundamentally divided that the only way really to go forward in a peaceful way would probably be to do something like a divorce. But inevitably, you thought the U.S. was going to break apart in some way. And today we have some survey results, some poll results that seem to show that that's really true. And that's really in the minds of people. So, first, can you tell us why you think the U.S. is destined to break apart?
Well, I know that when I first started talking about this type of thing, I'll have to look back, uh, probably 2 years ago anyway, where I actually said, yeah, I think this Civil War is in the cards or a war of secession, two different things, which I'm sure I would have explained the difference between them because it's a very important difference. But when I first mentioned this a couple of years ago, it was with a lot of fear and trepidation because you say something that sounds that outrageous. I mean, people just, turn off their radio and say, this is ridiculous. This is nonsense. It's never going to happen. It's just completely off the table. Uh, so I think it's interesting that this group that you reference uh, is actually taking it seriously now. We're talking about an establishment group that are taking it seriously, not just some outsider intellectual speculating on stuff. So anyway, the reason I think that the U.S. is going to break up on one basis or another, and there are several possibilities as to how that could happen, is because people have just divided themselves into such antagonistic groups, and you cannot have uh, in the same political entity, especially not where that political entity is so important, where where the government is involved in just about everything that goes on in the U.S. and the people think it should be involved in just about everything.
Both sides, in fact.
Both sides think that exactly. And when they have absolutely antithetical views about the way the world works, about what's right and what's wrong, about what we should or should not do, uh, it just doesn't work. So that's why the Soviet Union. Well, that's not exactly why the Soviet Union split up, but it's more like why Yugoslavia split up and why Czechoslovakia split up. Absolutely why the Sudan split up more recently yet. And there'll be other places that that's going to happen to, like the Venetia area in Italy, and it's not the only one in Italy, and the Basque area and the Catalan areas in Spain. And there's still movements like this going on in France and of course, Scotland in the United Kingdom, and you might add Wales in too, although you don't hear too much about that. So there's plenty of things. And of course, this is going on uh, and always has been throughout Africa and the Middle East. I mean, Iraq should definitely split up into at least three countries, at least. And same for Lebanon. It's a long list. And my argument is basically that as the economy starts sliding worse, and I'll parenthetically add that COVID is the pin or the sledgehammer that broke the bubble, but it's not the reason in itself, I don't think. Yeah, so this isn't just going to be in the US, it's going to be everywhere, but it's going to be in the US too.
Hmm. It almost kind of this global trend. It kind of reminds me of that, the period before World War One, where all of these monarchies around the world, just sort of got overturned. They were everywhere, wherever you went, it seemed to be happening all across the globe. You know what I mean? It's just like it swept the world. Is that? Do you think that's a parallel with today in a way? That there's just a total reshift or shifting in the political structures are everywhere.
Well, let's think about that. you know, World War One, people don't think about it very much, but it was a really big deal. I mean, it created a whole bunch of new countries in Europe, of all places. When the Austro-Hungarian Empire broke up, it was just one big empire, just like the, if you wish, the Soviet Union. And out of it came Poland and Slovenia and Slovakia and Austria and Hungary. Uh, so yeah, new countries were established, and
But in the
and
period,
oddly, as we mentioned before, in the 1850s, Italy, which was a bunch of little kingdoms and duchies and God knows what, formed into Italy under Garibaldi, and then in 1871, same thing happened in Germany, which is full of little princedoms and God knows what, became Germany. I don't see why the colors on the wall map on the wall can't start running again. I mean,
and as Americans seem to think not long ago that this was something that was impossible. And let me just pull up this survey that was done recently because it's really interesting how quickly attitudes have shifted. So, Doug, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but
yeah, yeah, I got
here,
it.
yeah, here's their summary under the succession category. Now, they actually did ask lots of different questions on different topics. And, this is interesting in and of itself. The whole thing is, I think, and I'll share it in the description for the video, but just focus on the succession part in particular. So they said this is something they would never even ask about, but in light, and they think it's just so serious that it's so radical that it would never make sense for them to include that in this democracy survey they do regularly. But because of some formal movements in a certain number of states, Mississippi, Texas, Wyoming, et cetera, talking about succession, they figured it was worth asking a couple questions. So they had two questions on the survey, and I'll just read these for you real quick. The first one was, some people say the divisions within our country have grown to so deep that we would be better off dividing into more like-minded regions that would govern themselves separately. Do you support or oppose the idea of the United States dividing into more than one nation? And it says overall, 29% of respondents supported the dissolution of the country into like minded regions. Now, that to me is shocking that is 29% already.
Big number, actually. Yes.
And so then the next question, they feel like this question was a little vague and it was like kind of framed, to avoid pain so that maybe they would get a better, more people would be inclined to say they support this. But they asked a more direct question, at least in their mind, which was, would you support or oppose, insert your state, seceding from the United States to join a new union with these states? And so they broke it into separate regions. So they had the South, they had the West, they had the Midwest. Actually, all the regions are here: the Pacific, Mountain, South, Heartland, and Northeast. So they broke it into these different ones, and they had essentially the identical response. 30% of the people said, yeah, they would support this. I mean, are you surprised that's kind of fast?
And it broke down in all these places uh, according to party lines more than anything else, too, didn't it? Where the Republicans were more pro and the Democrats were generally more con.
No, actually, and I was saving this to tell you this, that's the way I read it at first in that article that I sent you. But as I dug into this more, it actually, so it corresponds, they say, with a regional partisan context. So in the West, in like California and Oregon and Washington, where Democrats are stronger, they make up the majority, the Democrats were more likely to be interested in secession than the Republicans were. So it's like in the South, where you had more Republicans, the Republicans were more interested in it. So, I mean, I found that surprising because I found it kind of shocking because the way I thought of it is you're really starting to see the opposing group as the other. They're the other that aren't even around you, that aren't even in control, and you want to get away from them so badly, you want to get out of the country. I mean, isn't that shocking?
Yeah, it is. And of course, this is perhaps one consequence of the homogenized national media, where I think a lot of people in the Republican states, and here I just have to say again, they shouldn't be called the Republican states, should not be called red states. That meme started back in 1980 with some talking head because throughout history, red has been associated with the left, the people that want to overthrow things, even in military maneuvers. The bad guys are always the Red Army and we're always the Blue Army. So how this got transposed where the Republicans are red and the Democrats are blue, well, just more things to kind of confuse people's thinking, subtly, covertly. But so I'm sorry I went off on that tangent that occurred to me.
Don't you think that the like I think it just shows that each side is starting to view the other side as the other, and that
Yeah,
precedes great problems. As soon as you see them so apart from
I know
yourself.
when I tune into MSNBC or CNN or a couple of these other channels like that, um, yes, it antagonizes me because they say things that are just frankly antithetical to what I believe is correct and right and good. And I think that's the case with most people that are Republicans, although I am not a Republican, let me emphasize. So, yeah, I mean, you can really get annoyed and you see that these people are in control of everything. Yeah, and these people are in control of Washington, D.C. and can tell me what to do and tell me how much I have to pay in order for them to tell me what to do. Yeah, it's getting pretty gut level. And this COVID thing, of course, has not helped because a lot of people are still kind of locked up in their apartments or under house arrest. And they're getting kind of antsy and unhappy. And just giving them, some table scraps, $1,400 or whatever the number is kind of insulting,
Oh,
frankly.
and dragging it out for months and months, on top of it.
Well, but it's worse than that because it turns out, I think I read in this poll that you've got there, that most Americans, Republicans and Democrats, are all for it. So this tells me that most Americans have absolutely no understanding of the basics of economics about like what money is and what happens when you print a lot more of it and so forth, and forget about what the social and other consequences of it are. So, but hey, I understand. I mean, listen, somebody sends me $1,400, you want it or not? Yeah, sure. Give me the money. I mean, it makes sense from that point of view.
Especially if they feel like, even if I could even see a fiscal conservative, doing some mental gymnastics to justify this by saying, well, you think about all the money we're wasting on all these other things. At least this is going to the American people. So this is a good one. But, it seems like they pass all these spending bills and they hold out this little carrot for people to keep going along with it, thinking, well, eventually I'll get my time at the trough.
Haven't I read someplace that something like $50 million, I mean, that used to be a lot of money, it's absolute chump change today, is going to Afghanistan to help inculcate gender equality among the natives?
Yeah, that was the last, the last bill that was passed, the last spending bill, right? Yep, it was
This
great.
is just this is just comical. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. If it was in a satirical movie, people would say, no, that's just too stupid.
And I think what people really miss on all this is that clearly the people in charge, they hate you. And they hate you if you're a Republican, and they hate you if you're Democrat. They hate you. And all these things are done. I feel like they're transparent in their hatred for you, and you're just not getting the message. No matter what they do to you, you're still like, but maybe maybe something good will happen, or maybe when my team's in charge, we'll be okay. But no, it seems like they just hate you, and in the meantime, they're getting the people to be really, really, really angry at each other instead. To
And let me make a prediction. I hope this is a prediction that's entirely too outlandish to come through, but I'll predict that in 2022, the Democrats are going to win and they're going to stay in power. And they're not going to get out of power at any time. in the foreseeable future. Because these people are actually the same psychological makeup as Bolsheviks or as Jacobins from the French Revolution or as Maoists during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. They have exactly the same psychological and political view of the world. The fact that they're born in the US, it's, that's just an accident of birth, an accident of geography. So that these people are in office, they're going to cement themselves in office. It's what they're doing now. Uh, Part of it is making Washington, D.C. a state, which gives them 2 more senators and another rep, which is always helpful, of course. So, yeah. But, if these, and maybe if the Democrats do that, then the Republicans will really get angry. They figure that they're really going to be taken advantage of then, and things might get out of control uh, at the next election. So this isn't over just because Donald Trump is out of office. It's just begun. He was nothing but a catalyst, actually.
I think so too. He really drove people on the left, and got them to all join and consolidate their positions against one common enemy. And and all it seems to do is entrench each side against each other. So it doesn't seem like it ends well. But again, I just have to point out this thing that I think is super shocking, though. And I mentioned it already, but it's so shocking to me. On the Pacific one, it's the majority of people who want secession are not the Republicans, they're not the independents, they're the Democrats. It's like they are ruled by Democrats. The whole
Yeah,
country. Who are they trying to get away from? I don't understand. It's
I know what's the matter with these people, but it won't end there because I think in the past we talked about one possible less radical solution to this problem is to do it the way the Swiss have done it. You've got the German Swiss and the French Swiss and the Italian Swiss, and they're divided into cantons. And in Switzerland, basically the only thing the federal government does, and the only thing it taxes you for, is defense of Switzerland. That's it. Well, they have a national currency too, but I mean, the federal government is unimportant. It's basically what your canton does. And your canton is even the one that grants you Swiss citizenship. I mean, the federal government issues the passport, but it won't do it unless your canton sets you up for it, approves you. So, yeah, that might work. It's the way the states used to work, pretty much the way the cantons in Switzerland do now, before the war between the states. But even now, that's not going to work because there was a movement that gained some currency a few years ago in California, where they wanted to break it up into several different states because you got the farming and ranching areas that have absolutely nothing to do with San Francisco and LA, nothing. I mean, they don't want to be in the same state with those people. So and look at Eastern Washington. It's got nothing to do with Seattle and all that. And they don't like it very much, the people in Eastern Washington. I'm not so sure about Oregon, but I remember years ago in Kansas, of all places, Kansas, talk about the heartland. And there was a movement to break off Western Kansas from Eastern Kansas. Now, why might that have been? It's because there's actually a lot of oil that comes out of Western Kansas. And all the tax revenues were basically going to the east. And they didn't like that very much. So they wanted to break up Kansas. I don't know how many things like this there are.
but
Probably a lot. A few people have heard about this Kansas thing, I'll bet you, but it was real.
there's even an effort for a county in Colorado to join Wyoming, but there's just no chance. you know so these things pop up all the time, but it seems like the central power, whatever that is, if it's on the state level over the counties or on the national level over states, like it just breaks a lot of rice bowls for that to happen.
Yeah, it does. So I don't know how this is going to end, quite frankly. The best way it can end, once again, I'll refer people back to Neil Stephenson's book, Diamond Age, where what he posits in that novel, excellent novel, incidentally, sci-fi, is that in the future, conventional political entities will still exist, some kind of the same, some radically different, much weaker. But what's much important is that the world will break up into files, which is to say, groups of people that share something important in common together. And that's what unites them. And that's what makes them want to not only hang together, but defend each other and work with each other and everything else. And those files can be spread across arbitrary physical borders all over the world, if you will. So maybe that's the happiest solution to come up with
It
on
is.
this.
Let me show you let me show you one other thing in the survey that may lead to what are the potential less happy solutions. So they ask the people in the survey to explain how they feel about different alternatives to democracy, including expert rule. So that's, you know, having the Faucis of the world run things,
Oh, great.
a strong man, the military, or democracy as a political system. So this is how it.
Those are the options. Those are the options we're given.
Yeah.
How about
So,
how about how about self rule? How about autarky? You know,
oh, I mean, come on, that's ridiculous.
yeah, no, forget about it. Somebody's got to tell you what to do. That is absolutely shocking. I'll bet the military came out on top on this. I
Also,
can't.
so what they didn't, it wasn't like pick one. It was ones that you feel you think are fairly good or very good.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then it's done by political parties. So you have political affiliation. So expert rule, you have the Democrats way up here, where 60% roughly would be, you know, think that that's a, you know, fairly or a very good system of rule. And you have the Republicans lower, but like not that low. I mean, you know, it's still in my mind very high to say you want a bunch of experts to tell you what to do. Then you get down to strongman, which is, you know, everyone's around 25%. It seems like everyone kind of feels like, yeah, there's some potential there. Some potential
I
there.
guess a strong man would be like Trump from one point of view, or Cuomo from another point of view. Perhaps that would be an American type strong man.
Yeah, that's
Guys,
right. Yeah. And
the
then
military.
so
Oh my God.
democracy is still very high, you know, for people on this, which I guess, you know, I'm not sure that's a good thing, but um, I want to go back and look at this from previous years because to me, you know, there's a substantial number of people that are open to totally different alternatives that are totally willing to throw away the thing that, you know, they is held as this high value, such a high value that we go around the world forcing it upon others, this democracy. But
Well, I
early,
don't know if you saw, it was banned from YouTube. So I saw it on one of these other systems of relaying videos. There's a journalist named Ami Horowitz, and he spent a day. I don't know if we talked about this before or not.
we did not, we did not.
So he spent a day, Horowitz did, on the Yale campus, and what he pretended to do was, well, he pretended to be taking a poll. Well, he was taking a poll. He wasn't really pretending, but he gave an argument for why the Constitution of the U.S. should be replaced, and we don't need the Constitution anymore. We need something very different. And he makes an argument, a brief argument, because he's on the street with people, Yale students, so smarter than the average bear, you'd presume. And it turns out that 2/3 of them agreed with him, either radically or, yeah, I'll go along with that.
Well,
That, yeah, we should replace the Constitution. And only one person that he talked to all day, a student, said, no, that's ridiculous. I don't want to replace it for all these, you know, various reasons which we could name. Uh,
yeah,
so
actually,
this is
he was
this is
collecting signatures. He was collecting signatures for a petition to abolish the Constitution.
it was a petition. It was a petition. It wasn't just a survey. You're quite correct. He asked him to sign a petition. No, the situation is actually hopeless at this point, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think that, you know, you predicted before that you thought that we would soon see a strong man in charge, and not a strong man maybe by the Trump or Cuomo side of things, but much more military type strong man. And it certainly seems like the public is open to totally shuffling the deck on this American experiment at this point. And it's getting
especially if the economy collapses as badly as I think it will. They're going to want somebody to come in and straighten things out for them. And as an institution, Americans, I think, trust the military more than they do any other institution. And yeah, I'm willing to bet that in 2024, we'll have at least one ex-general running for office, maybe two, who knows?
I think you're right. Well, we did another video that I would encourage people to check out. I'll link to that talks about the breakup of the U.S. in more detail. And so, if you want to look back at what we talked about a few months ago and see it, and I think you'll find this trend is emerging very quickly, and where Americans' attitudes were at first, when we first published that video, people were like, "Hell no, never! I'm never gonna, never is the U.S. gonna fall apart. I'll die before the country falls apart." That's what we were hearing, stuff like that in our comments to the video, and it seems like attitudes are shifting quite rapidly. So it's very interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, generally, as a as an investment person, I'm fond of saying the trend is your friend, but this is one trend that is not your friend.
No doubt. All right. Well, we'll leave it there then, Doug, for today, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.
Okay, Superman. Okay.